History 101, Lecture 16, 19th Century Reform. We're talking education reform here. Educational reform in the 19th century is big. Why are a lot of the 19th century reforms are, why is our educational system the way it is? It comes from this 19th century era of reform that sticks, right? There's a reason we don't educate. We educate the way the 19th century did in a lot of ways, not colonial America, because education in colonial America was different. 19th century reformers looked at 18th century education and said it's wrong in a lot of ways. That's what you're reforming. These 19th century Americans are looking at the past century and they don't like it either. Just like a lot of 21st century Americans have a conniption about the 19th century, the same thing. 19th century Americans looked at the 18th century and said, we have some problems with it. And so that's what education reform is exactly as that is. 19th century educators go, oh, that's so last century. That's wrong or bad. We've got to change it. So we're going to see a lot of educational reform in the 19th century. Number one, this is going to seem interesting to us because we're so extremely secular today that the 19th century looks super overly religious. And what's funny is, when you study education in the 19th century, it was moving away from a religious training to a secular education. So from their point of view, from the 19th century point of view, they were becoming secular, which is interesting because when you study religious critiques of the 19th century, that's what ministers were worried about in the 19th century is American culture becoming more secular. So it's kind of funny from our point of view because we're so far one way. We've become so secular. We're anti-religion, anti-Christian almost to the point that the 19th century looks super religious. From their point of view, they're actually secularizing. You see a change from the colonial era religious training to a more secular education. So that's the first kind of change or reform you see. The second reform or change you see in the 19th century is this idea of public education. That the state, the government, should, in some ways, develop the educational foundation of American citizens. So Massachusetts is going to be the first state to fund or have tax support for public schools. That's what we have today, right? The public education system. When you say public education, what are you saying? It's a government school. Taxes are taken from people. Okay. Taken, theft, stolen, whatever you want to look at it. Taxes are taken from people, and then the government builds schools. That's the public education system. Massachusetts is the first state to do that. So again, colonial America, depending on the town, right? The town, New England towns, they would build a school and hire a teacher, right? It would be kind of private, you could say almost. But here we have where government steps in and tax support to actually build not just one school for a town, but the entire state, right? By 1860, every state offered free public education, at least to its European American citizens. And you see, in the North, you do see black individuals, African American individuals going to school, but if we drop out the slave population, we'll see that the U.S. has one of the highest literacy rates in the country. In the world, in the country. The United States has one of the highest, by the Civil War, has one of the highest literacy rates in the world. A famous figure, Horace Mann, he's called the father of American education. And a lot of his ideas about education really transform how Americans in the 19th century approach education, rejecting a lot of 19th century perspectives and points of view. For example, in the 18th century, during the colonial era, children were seen as little adults. Puritan New England, little adults. That's why, they were they were. That's why there was corporal punishment and kind of severe discipline, because children should know how to act. They're little adults. So so the corporal punishment is heavy. One to keep them safe. You got to learn the lesson. Not go and do stupid things to get you killed. But also, like, you should know how to act. And so you have a lot of corporal punishment is okay. Children are little adults. They kind of know how to act. How do you become a teacher in colonial America? Know how to read. You walk into a village or a town and you're one of the few people that know how to read and can do math. Congratulations, you're the teacher, right? And so, you can just go into a town and just start teaching if they think you're good enough. Horace Mann is really going to develop this idea that children are not little adults. They're clay. They're tabula rasa. What's tabula rasa? That's a psychological term, right? It means blank slate. Psychologists today theorize or argue that human beings are blank slates at birth. We don't know anything. There's some adults that don't know anything. But we don't know anything. We're a tabula rasa. Right? And so what does that mean? Then you're not a little adult. You don't know how to act. The 5-year-old doesn't know how to act. And so for Horace Mann, this idea that children need to be molded, created, and you get it? They're not little adults. Adults just aren't there. You create an adult. You raise an adult. You raise children. Notice that term, right? You raise them. Right? You raise them. You get them to adulthood. Horace Mann discouraged corporal punishment, and he established the first state teacher training program. So, what do you mean? Just the simple fact that I know how to read doesn't qualify me to be a teacher? So this idea that you need to be trained. You need to be trained to teach, right? The McGuffey Eclectic Reader used to teach American values, respect authority and morality, be frugal, teach you how to read. These McGuffey readers very popular in the 19th century. And this is also, go back to lecture 11, and we talk about the development of American culture. You have millions of school children learning how to read out of the same book. These McGuffey Eclectic Readers. There's different editions and there's different levels, but you get it? You're going to create an American culture. How do you do that? If millions of school children are reading and studying the same thing, you're going to develop a common culture. So normal schools, college education to train teachers. My first graduate degree, Sam Houston State University. Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, started out as a teacher training college to create teachers. Again, the beginning of this idea of public education. And what's interesting about that idea of public education, remember from previous lectures what have we talked about? More and more Americans are voting during the early 19th century. You get it? If we're going to let more and more Americans vote, they had better what? They better have an 8th grade education, which is basic reading, writing, and math. The 3 R's, right? Reading, writing, and math. And so this idea of mass public education, everyone's got to have an 8th grade education, coincides with what? We're letting a lot more people vote, right? Remember, Jacksonian Americans called the universal white male suffrage. You're going to let millions and millions of more people vote, right? Well, okay. Well, they better know how to read. They better have an 8th grade education, right? How do you develop a strong republic? How do you develop a strong republic? You have to have an educated citizenry. Okay, so if you're gonna let all these poor rural frontier white men vote, okay, they better know how to read. They better have an 8th grade education at least, right? And so that's one of the ways you develop a strong republic is they have to know how to read. You have to have an educated citizenry. Or a republic and even a democracy that's not educated, you fall into tyranny and anarchy. Lyceum, sorry, I gotta stop saying. Anyways, lyceums. I promise, on campus in class, I don't say I'm this much, but I tend to do it when I do videos. Anyways, lyceums have become extremely popular during the 19th century. You have traveling intellectuals, philosophers, writers, teachers go around and talk about their intellectual subjects. So this was popular in the 19th century. You have a building, a lyceum was a building. It looked like an arena, like a seating hall, like a theater, where people would go in and they'd sit and they'd listen to a speaker. Talk about all kinds of stuff, science, literature, philosophy. Ralph Waldo Emerson would go around and talk at these lyceums. And the idea here for middle and upper class Americans, it was how you were getting educated. You were getting educated. You were hearing new ideas, right? Not 18th century colonial ideas. We're getting 19th century ideas, right? Kindergarten develops during the 19th century. Grade levels developed during the 19th century. Should an 8-year-old go to school with an 18-year-old? No, there are different levels of learning, right? You see in the urban parts of the country, you see school grades develop. 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. You see kindergarten develop. By the way, what does kindergarten mean? Kinder. Kinder is German for what? Child or kid or child. Kinder. Child for child. It's German for child. Garten. Garten. What does that sound like? Garten is German for garden. By the way, English is related to German. Like when you study genealogy, language genealogy, English is related to German. That's why when you study German, there's similar vocabulary, right? Garten, Garten, it's garden. You get it? Child garden. You raise children. Kindergartens develop. High schools develop. Is every 8th grader ready to go to college? High schools develop. How democratic-minded is this? How democratic-minded is this? If everyone wants to go to college, then they should be able to do that. In colonial America, in 18th century America, the only people that went to college were those that were going to use it. Ministers, lawyers, diplomats, wealthy people only went to college. You only went to college if you were going to use it, so to speak. In the 19th century, how democratic-minded is that? If you want to be the smartest farmer in Cox County, great. Go to high school and go to college. So the idea of high schools developed. You've heard of preparatory schools, right? Preparatory schools to prepare you to go to college. High schools developed during this era to get people ready for college who want to go. How democratic-minded is that? Okay. Noah Webster, another famous individual, is called the Schoolmaster of the Republic. His dictionaries, his textbooks standardized American English. Notice what I said, American English. Remember, Lecture 11, we're developing American culture. Right? We're not British anymore. So we're not going to speak British English. Noah Webster goes a long way to developing this idea of an American Standard English. American Standard Spelling. You get it? What's one reason why reading 19th century documents is so hard? 18th century. In colonial America, why are some documents so hard to read in the 18th century, colonial America? Because people in the 18th century, they spelled how words sounded to them. So you would have all kinds of spelling. Because people spelled how it sounded to them. Okay, so there wasn't necessarily standard English, standard American English, right? People tended to spell how they heard it, and so you get it. Accents are going to affect. How do you spell Baston? I've heard Baston. Does that sound like Boston? No, Baston. It's not like A, B, you know, you spell how you sound, right? Spell y'all. How y'all doing? You know, Noah Webster goes a long way to standardizing American English. So regardless of your accent, we're going to spell things the same way, right? So I can say Baston and Harvard Yard all I want. I can say y'all all I want. I can say y'all all I want, and we'll spell it all the same way, right? Right? Regardless of our accent, we're going to spell generally the same way. And so you have standard American English with Noah Webster. I've already kind of mentioned it with higher education, this idea that in the 19th century, that if you want to go to college, go. Okay? Second Great Awakening really do a lot of small liberal arts colleges. During the 19th century, you're going to see federal land grant colleges, where states and the federal government and states start setting up a state college system. Like, for example, you've heard of Ohio State, right? State university system, right? Developing colleges like Texas A&M. What does A&M stand for? Agriculture and mining. So there's all kinds all over the country. There's Alabama A&M, Texas A&M, agriculture and mining colleges. UTEP, University of Texas El Paso, used to be an A&M college, agriculture and mining, right? They changed it to UTEP, University of Texas El Paso. Again, University of Texas, it's the state university. This idea of the government funding education.